twice as loud as the normal human voice, so I have to usually keep it down.
I'm turning my volume down as you say that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually turning it up.
There's another one. There was one of these that we did earlier where you could only hear me, and then the other person was talking really quietly, so you had to turn it up to hear it, and then I was just like too much, and nobody could watch it, so I had to correct that.
You can only do this with winemakers or spirits makers who are loud like you.
Yes, pretty much. So that's good. I think you can do it. You got a pretty good voice.
I can project.
Good. Fabulous. Well, thanks for joining me today and doing this with me.
This is awesome. It's good to see your face.
Likewise. And I just wanted to start off by saying, I know I've told you this before, but since we're on Instagram Live, this is all I drink. We don't have a lot of floor stacks of wine at Mission that are $40 wines. It's usually like $8.99, out the door stuff. But the Pasadena staff got really behind this, and this is floor stacked. Everything around it is like a $10 Prosecco, and then there's the $39.99 Hirsch Pinot Noir that's half empty and down to like an ankle biter because everybody's just pushing this out the door because we all love it.
I am so honored. I never get floor stacks, so thank you, David. I really appreciate that. We designed that wine. I mean, design is a loose word, but that wine is intended to just make you happy and be delicious. So I'm glad that people are finding it so.
They are, and we're still on the 18. I know you guys have the 19. I basically cleaned out everything you had of the 18 because it was like my house wine. I sent an email about this yesterday to my insider list. I was like, I've consumed more of this wine than any wine in the last 5 years.
The 18 is sick. The 18, just 2018 in general is a vintage. It's, not to quote other people, but Antonio Galloni at Venice said that he thinks it's the most. 2018 in Sonoma County is one of the greatest vintages for any region that he's ever tasted. He tastes a lot more wines than I do, obviously, and I was shocked to hear that simply because I just haven't had the opportunity to taste a lot of 18s. I think ours are really good, and it was sort of an effortless vintage in a lot of ways, and I think those are the vintages that make the best wines, where the wines and the vines find their natural balance. The other thing too is the 2018 Bohan. I mean, it's a year older than the 19, so it's more settled into itself. I think ultimately it is a better vintage, 18 versus 19, but especially to drink right now. Like, you were smart to grab the last of the 18. So if anybody hasn't tried it, like, grab a bottle.
We have it. We have plenty. We have a lot of all the wines right now, and we have a lot of all the wines because Mission. Sorry, I got a kitten here that needs to be moved. We have to sort of draw a line in the sand as to like establish ourselves as having a position on what we believe in. For the 40 years before I got here, Mission just sort of like carried a lot of stuff, and you could get first growth Bordeaux, you could get E40s sparkling Moscato. But we want to, sort of align ourselves. There's like 7 flavors, so you can't try just one. You got to try all 7. Otherwise, you don't get it.
And what's your favorite flavor?
I haven't had them all. There's a new tropical Moscato. I know because I have to upload all the photos into the website when they arrive. But
wild.
It is. It's a whole other world.
What do you flavor it with?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's made.
Maybe it's the terroir of the vineyard. That there's like a Moscato vineyard that has just a really tropical terroir, and then another one that's like a pear terroir. My favorite weed gummy is the sparkling pear prosecco. I think is the name of it.
Yeah.
Which I've never had a pear prosecco, but it's good in weed form at least.
It is. We have the watermelon gummies. So. We're into the watermelon, half CBD, half THC around here for sure. It's good. I don't think it's real watermelon.
Not at Mission. You can't.
No. I mean at my house. Yeah.
Oh.
Just in my home. Yeah.
Yeah. At the place where all the treats are, the good wines, the good gummies.
Yeah. I mean, hey, you stockpile what you need. But anyways, back to the point. One thing when we were talking about the wine, when you and I were talking about the wines, and I conveyed this back to the team at Mission, that you had said that was really intriguing to me was that your dad refers to the vineyard as earthquake terroir, and that was conveyed by the San Andreas Fault label. And I thought that was really interesting because one thing that I know that people are always interested in, especially people who are just getting into wine, is this whole idea of how land plays a role in the flavors of their wine. And I know that people that have been in the industry, this is all second nature to us. We understand why what is what, but there's a lot of people who are getting into Hirsch at Pasadena for the first time. And I wanted to create this conversation with you so that they could learn what it is that's so special about the Hirsch Vineyard.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, my father calls our terroir, our site to be, it's earthquake terroir. We're half a mile from the San Andreas Fault. We're 2.5 miles from the Pacific Ocean in western Sonoma County, and the fault line runs in between us and the ocean, so the fault's about half a mile away. The reality of that is that our vineyards are planted in the fault line zone, the earthquake zone, and the soils are incredibly complex. I mean, the coast of California, which was formed by the San Andreas Fault, is less than 30 million years old. So geologically speaking, this is very young land. These two giant tectonic plates came together and crashed together and created the coast of California, and also created this incredible mishmash of soil types, soil structures, in other words, is it clay or is it sand or so on and so forth, and also very complex topography, right? So if you look at the coastal hills, there's almost no flat land, so we don't have any flat vineyards, really. I mean, there's a little bit here and there, but for the most part, we're talking about vineyards that have multiple aspects. We have vineyards that face every single direction, and then all these different soil types. So the farming here is like farming a geologic jigsaw puzzle. We are a single vineyard officially, right? Hirsch Vineyards. If we sell fruit to other wineries, so like if you drink the William Sellium Hirsch or the Litterai Hirsch, you get this impression of a monolithic single vineyard, but the reality is that Hirsch is more like a village in Burgundy, which is made up of all of these little distinct parcels, each of which have their own expression, their own terroir, and then also there's this overarching terroir, or this kind of overarching expression of Hirsch. So the way we farm, the way we make wine is entirely driven by that earthquake terroir reality that I just described. So we have 72 planted acres, but 60 farming parcels, 60. So the average size of a parcel is just above an acre, which is tiny. I mean, much smaller than the average size of a cru in Burgundy, which is, a region that we all know is super complex. And that's, because, again, the land here is young. So we farm each of those parcels individually. We vinify them each individually, which is super fun because it means that we have a diversity of expressions of Pinot Noir, fruit conditions, flavors that we get to work with as farmers and winemakers. And it's also why we are able to make so many different Pinot Noirs from the Hirsch Vineyard, but they're all different. It's because there's so much diversity within this small area due to the fault line.
So when you're looking at like the different labels, because we have all of them now, right? So we have the Burgundian, which we talked about, but let's go to the estate wines. So if I'm looking at the San Andreas Fault Hirsch, what am I drinking there? What's in that bottle?
So you're drinking the wine that represents the whole of Hirsch, right? So I mentioned that there's 60 parcels. About 50% of those parcels in a given year will actually go into the San Andreas Fault Pinot Noir. So it's 100% Hirsch, it's 100% Pinot Noir, but it has fruit from all over the vineyard. So it's this it's a super complex blend, but more importantly, from our point of view, it's a wine that really represents the whole vineyard in one glass. And, my dad says, if you only ever drink one wine from Hirsch, it should be the San Andreas, because it gives you that whole picture. And it's an incredibly complicated blend to put together because, how do you make 30 parts harmonious? And so that's really, the job of the winemaker and the blending is to try to make this cohesive expression that captures the complexity of this site. So
when I take them into the expensive room where I have the estate and the East Ridge and the West Ridge, when we were tasting those wines, the body and just like the color of the East Ridge and the West Ridge were totally different. One was like, almost rosé like, and it was very light, very delicate, lower alcohol, very approachable. The other, much more structured, darker, denser. What's the difference between those two parcels, and why does that, result in wines that are so different?
Yeah, so West Ridge and East Ridge are, you can see one from the other. They're very close to each other. They're both about 30 years old. They are completely different soils. So the West Ridge is this heavy, dense clay. We're often taught, those of us that are students of Burgundy, that, clay soils is going to mean a heavier wine. The other soil they have predominantly in Burgundy is limestone. That's going to be a, more lifted wine. So this soil, this clay soil that the West Ridge is planted on is so dense and so difficult for the roots to penetrate. It also has a lot of magnesium in it, which makes it challenging for plants to uptake nutrients from the soil. This is very stressful soil for the vines. In addition, my father planted cuttings that he got from Mount Eden Vineyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the early 80s. So before Mount Eden was replanted. And these cuttings, you can trace the history of these vines all the way back to the guy who brought them from Burgundy to California. It's actually super cool. It's like they're like it's like plant material that's like a history book. And so what that means is we've got it's a true Massal selection, a true heritage selection of Pinot Noir with a lot of genetic diversity, which adds again to the complexity of the wines. But it also has a virus called leaf roll, which again is stressing the vine and inhibiting the production of sugar in the vines. So West Ridge is like stressed vines on stressed soil. My dad nearly tore it out after 98 when we had the last big El Nino year, but he said, let's try to save these vines and see what we can learn. And that's my father's, his mind is pointed towards inquiry, which I think is so critical when you're farming in a new place, in such a complex place. So anyways, the West Ridge produces these wines that are like fragile and delicate and ethereal, but they still have this core of, it's very delicate, but they still have tannin, which is a real hallmark of our site. Our wines tend to be on the more tannic side for American Pinot, but it's always this like really supple, super pretty wine. And like you said, approachable young, but can age surprisingly. You wouldn't necessarily think, it's sort of a lighter wine, but it can age and it has this like perfume to it. East Ridge, opposite side of the property, steep slopes, very shallow soils, also 30-year-old vines, more driven by it's a little bit of a warmer site because it's east facing. A section of the East Ridge has phylloxera, so another stressor, but really decreases the yields and contributes to concentration in the wines, which is really interesting. So you end up with this sort of like brooding, tannic, dark fruited. It's like a little monster. There's been vintages where you're like, is this like Nebbiolo or is this Pinot Noir? And but I don't mean that it's like, ripe or anything like that. I mean that as a compliment. I love Nebbiolo, but more than it just has this kind of sappy, dark quality to it. But it tends to be quite low in alcohol. Both of them do because of the disease that they both have, phylloxera and leaf roll. So really cool wines because totally different.
How long did it take your dad, do you think, to start noticing some of the differences between the parcels after he planted them? Was it like a decade or was it pretty fast?
He would say that it was that 1998
okay.
year where we got 150 inches of rain over the winter. And we nearly lost some vineyards because they were just like so waterlogged that the roots started to rot. And, it's crazy to say this. I mean, my dad, he's from the Bronx, but he moved to California in the 60s. He lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And, he knew about the San Andreas Fault. We all do, right? It's right there. He felt the earthquakes and stuff. But when he started planting up here, I mean, he had no background in farming or geology or soil science or anything like that. And he planted just based on the slope, right? Like where you can get a tractor to, where it's safe to turn a tractor around was where the vine row would end. And so aspect, really. But yeah, I mean, after farming here, he started in 1980. So, about 20 years. And it was a really difficult vintage like 98 that really woke him up to the variability in the soils and the need to respond both in planting and in farming and ultimately in winemaking to the individuality of the different sites. And so in 2002, he planted another 20 acres. He called that planting his like thesis project to graduate from kindergarten as a farmer on the West Sonoma Coast. He still considers himself to be like just in first, second grade, which I think is smart. We got a long way to go. And so this new planting, like if you look at the vineyard map that shows those now 20-year-old vines, they look like jigsaw puzzles because he drew, you know, he like dug soil pits 10 meters by 10 meters and mapped the whole thing with GPS and then planted. It's a crazy, I mean, so it's much more, those vineyards are much more reflective of the soil variability coming from the fault. So East and West Ridge were planted before then, and we actually are just starting to get into some replants on the East Ridge because of the phylloxera, and it's so fascinating to be able to apply what we've learned. You know, this is just the second generation of plantings here, really. So yeah.
Second generation of winemaker too, so it goes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, you know, my dad is 77, and he's planting new vineyards, you know, which is wild because the reality is, you know, you're 77, you plant a vineyard, you get fruit in 4 or 5 years, but you don't know anything about the vineyard till it's 10, 15 years old, and then you got to make the wine, you got to age the wine. So, you know, realistically, he's planting vineyards that he won't live to see the full potential of. And I think that is both remarkable and points to the fact that real viticulture, terroir-driven viticulture, is a multi-generational enterprise. It's not something we're going to figure out in one generation of humans. We're not going to figure out in one generation of vines. So, yeah, it's a big project.
My dad is going to be 80 this year, and I think he planted a young citrus tree today. So, I mean, they're still, I mean, as far as they're, I mean, I was talking to my mom, and she was like, oh, I think, you know, maybe I'd like to go up here someday and, you know, take a drive across this highway. I was like, when? Now? We got to go now, lady. Like, let's go. It's not going to
feel that way.
Nobody feels that way. Everybody thinks they're going to live forever. So, I mean, God bless them. Like you said, it's awesome. It's awesome to see people still having dreams and like being excited. And I mean, it goes to show, I guess, how much love there is in when you find something that, you know, that you really love doing and you don't ever want to stop. You're not looking for retirement. You're not counting the seconds until you can quit and then, you know, go live your life.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe your dad planted that citrus tree for you.
It's possible. I don't plan on moving to Modesto, California at this point in my life. But if you want to Airbnb it with me down the line, you're welcome to stay there when you're working with Gallo. This is just a personal question that I'm curious about. What do you think how long do you guys wait? Actually, let me say it like this. When you guys pull out your own wines to drink at home, how long are you waiting a lot of the time? Like what vintages are you pulling out to drink now that you've had already? Because I'm drinking everything pretty young because I don't have a Hirsch library to choose from.
Well, I have to say, you know, we talked about this a little bit the last time we chatted about drinkability versus like, you know, some like super special wine or super nerdy wine. And I'm really in the drinkability camp these days. But that doesn't mean that a wine has to be young. So anyways, to answer your question directly, I think the 09s and the 11s are drinking really well. 2011 was a panned vintage in California from the critics, but we had an awesome vintage in 2011. The wines they're drinking super well. So I'm drinking 9s and 11s if I'm drinking old stuff from our cellar. But, you know, to be honest with you, like, I think one thing that's really important for people who are in the wine industry to do is to, you know, keep on tasting, obviously, but we got to drink. Like, our customers, you know, the end customer of our wines is not opening a bottle of San Andreas and tasting it. They're drinking the whole bottle. So I really try to open our young wines, the wines that are in the market particularly, and actually drink a whole bottle of them. And really, like, you know, we make a lot of different wines, some of which we only sell to the mailing list, for example, or whatever. make like 50 cases of something or whatever. And so it's like, it's a lot of wine. So, you know, it may not sound like a big deal to sit down and drink a whole bottle, but I just really want to have the experience that my customers are having. And how does that bottle feel in the middle? What does a wine taste like when you get to the middle of the bottle? Because like, I think this is sometimes why, like, you know, you have some like weird funky wine and you taste, you're like, oh, this is really interesting. This is really cool. But after like 2 glasses, you're like, all I taste is the funk. And then, you know, or like a really big, like over the top wine. It's delicious for the first glass, but by the second glass, your palate gets tired. So I really want to know how our wines make you feel over the course of the whole bottle, how they change, how they open up. I think you can drink most of our wines young. There are vintages that you cannot drink young, like the 12s, the 15s, very difficult young. But most of our wines you can drink young. I do think they get more interesting with age, but they're not going to be like shut down. Like you could pull a bottle of the 17 Eastridge, which is probably the most tannic wine that we made that year, and, you know, throw it into a canner and it'll be great, you know, in an hour. Serve it with something fatty, like a fatty steak or something like that, and it'll be delicious. But can it also age? Yeah. So.
No, that's like the best of both worlds. There's so much new stuff out there, and I struggle with this now on the whiskey side and on like the spirit side and on the beer side. I mean, if I was buying beer right now, my head would explode because there's just like 100 new things to taste every week. And there's so many customers that want to have so many experiences because they're trying to formulate like a base level expertise in a relatively short period of time. And when you and I had to do it, I think it was easier because there was only X amount of products, and now there's 10X. And I'm sort of retreating and pushing customers to look inside a portfolio rather than to try like everything on the market. Try to pick producers that you're interested in, and then rather than taste one Hirsch wine and one wine from Matthiasson and one wine from Mount Eden and one wine from Ridge, like take a producer that intrigues you, whose winemaking and philosophy like that you gel with, or that seems interesting to you, and do like a deep dive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the world of wine is so vast, especially now. I mean, there's so many different producers. There's so many different wines. There's amazing importers in the United States, so you can get everything from all over the world, and it's truly overwhelming. And I think that one thing that can be really helpful for people who are trying to get like a grasp of wine is go to a shop like yours and establish a relationship with a good, experienced wine salesperson and be like, make me up like a mixed case. And here's my price point. Like maybe you want to say, oh, I want to spend $35 on average per bottle or $75 on average per bottle, and let them like go wild. And then remember, take pictures of the wines that you like, but also take pictures of the wines you don't like, and then go back and talk to that same salesperson again and be like, hey, I really like this. Can you take me in that direction? And another thing I would say too is like bring your values into play. Like, you're a consumer, your money talks, right? Like, decide how you want to spend your money. Do you want to support big industrial wineries, or do you want to support small family-owned wineries? Do you want to support wineries that are being thoughtful about what they put on the soil, or do you not care about that and you just want the absolute best perfect wine? I mean, that people have to decide that for themselves. And I think take some of the ideas that we have around food consumption and apply that to wine, because wine is an agricultural product, or at least it should be. I mean, there's a lot of wines that I think are maybe on the border there, but that can help cut out. Like if you just say, I'm just not going to drink industrially produced wines, like, and I'm just going to focus on like small family-owned wineries, like that will really help narrow the field. And that's a great place to, when you're looking at a wall of 50 Pinot Noirs or 150 Pinot Noirs, it can really help you narrow down your selection. And then you can find something delicious that is also, harmonious with your values,
Yeah, I think there's like an evolution that you go through, at least if you work in the industry, and maybe if you're, super serious as a consumer, which is you want to sort of know what the baseline is for everything. Like you want to know what like a great first growth, second growth Bordeaux tastes like. You want to know what a Grand Cru Burgundy tastes like. You want to know what great Champagne tastes like, and you go through all those things. And then I think once you know, it just, all the pressure's off, and then you just you just support who you love, and you sort of find peace.
Do you guys do that at Mission Liquor? I mean, like, I think that'd be like a cool thing to offer people and say, here's like a series of 6 packs that over the course, you can kind of do like a crash course. Because I agree with you too. I mean, I think starting with the classics is super important, just to give you a baseline, and then if you want to go off piste, then you go off piste. But like, it is important to know. I mean, I don't personally drink Bordeaux really that much. I mean, part of that is simply that I just don't know that much about it. If somebody offered me a nicely aged Bordeaux, I would absolutely drink it. But like, I'm really glad that I do have at least like a basic understanding of what Bordeaux tastes like. I actually probably drink more old Napa Cab than I do drink old Bordeaux, and I don't know. I think it's really important to have those touch points as you embark on this journey into the wide world of wine. So
I don't do that at Mission, and I just came up with this really idea to create these 6-packs that might, do that. I just came up with that right now. Nobody told me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyways, we can get into this later. This is the perfect segue to say thank you, and really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to support, the store that is trying to break into the space. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I wish you guys all the best. I can't wait to come down and visit Mission when I'm back in SoCal, able to come back down. So
likewise.
I'll look forward to seeing you guys.
All right, and up there too. Hopefully I can get in the car one of these days.
You're welcome anytime.
Thanks, Jasmine. Bye.
Thanks, David.